Ukraine hit Moscow with a massive drone strike overnight as Secretary of State Marco Rubio was meeting a high-level Ukrainian delegation for peace talks in Saudi Arabia. The split screen of 2 Russians killed conflicted with Rubio confirming Tuesday that the U.S. may restart intelligence sharing and military support of Kiev. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky avoided a run-in with Rubio, but had a positive meeting with Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, posting, quote, "I am grateful for his wise perspective on global affairs and support for Ukraine." This is Zelensky. "It was especially important to hear words of confidence in Ukraine's future."
On Monday, Elon Musk called Democratic Senator Mark Kelly a traitor after the Arizona senator posted a picture of himself during his visit to Ukraine. Kelly pounced on Musk, posting on X, "Traitor? Elon, if you don't understand that defending freedom is a basic tenet of what makes America great and keeps us safe, maybe you should leave it to those of us who do." Meanwhile, national security analyst and author Joe Cirincione condemned Trump's pro-Putin stance. In his recent Substack, Cirincione tore into what he calls Trump's lies, writing, quote, "After a few weeks of posturing by pretending that he was going to be tough on Putin, Trump has reverted to his natural obsequious position, flattering the murderous dictator and letting loose a torrent of lies about Ukraine, its leaders, and the war." Joining us now to dive into these new developments regarding the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia is Joe Cirincione, a national security analyst and former president of Plowshares Fund, a public grant-making foundation focused on nuclear nonproliferation and conflict resolution. Welcome, Joe. Thanks for being here with us.
Good morning. It's my pleasure.
You know, Joe, the American people do want this war to end. I think the world, for the most part, wants this war to end. And this was one of the promises that the president made, and we've got to end this thing. However, you have strong views about how it ends and what the deeper risks are of getting this wrong. What is your view of how this could be done in a way that is as fair to the Ukrainians as it is fair, hopefully, to the Russians?
Sure. Well, today, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is in Saudi Arabia, which has become the Trump administration's new favored destination for international talks, to basically pressure the Ukrainians to make concessions before negotiations even start. Look, we all agree that this war should end, that there should be a ceasefire, that there should be talks. But what are the purpose of the talks? And that's the crux of the issue. Do you make peace on Putin's terms, or do you try to arrive at a negotiated settlement? The Trump administration position is that we're going to make peace on Putin's terms. Here's what we know about the demands that Marco Rubio is placing on the Ukrainians in the talks today. It's not just, number one, that Ukraine sign a minerals deal that would turn over at least half the assets to U.S. companies so they could mine the mineral resources of Ukraine and the fossil fuels under its ground. But it's also now, we learned, that they want Zelensky, President Zelensky of Ukraine, to demonstrate he's serious about negotiations by agreeing to, number one, to have elections in Ukraine and to agree to step down. That has been one of Putin's primary demands. Now it's a U.S. demand. And number two, that Zelensky showed that he's willing to concede the territory that Russia now occupies to Russia. Again, that has been Putin's number one demand. It is now a U.S. demand. So the U.S. is bringing pressure on Ukraine to make these concessions before the talk, while there is no pressure on Russia whatsoever. It's all sticks for Ukraine, all carrots for Putin. That is not going to lead to a stable peace. That's going to lead to an unstable situation at best, with continued war in the future.
Well, I guess to address those 3 points, I mean, A, should not the U.S. Try to recoup some financial investment in Ukraine vis-a-vis this mineral deal that actually would involve us in ways I'm concerned about having American greater presence in the country. But then, and the elections thing in particular, should, as we've said, that the stakes of this conflict are existential in terms of democracy and Western values, and we're fighting an authoritarian, would it not be appropriate for the country to have an election? I mean, the U.S. has elections every 4 years, even regardless of our state of war. I know we've not faced an invasion akin to what Ukraine is facing, but is that such an unreasonable thing? And while I would absolutely, if I could wave a magic wand, certainly return all of Ukraine to Ukraine and have Russia be nowhere in the country and, you know, make Putin disappear, they have conquered this territory, and there's just no reasonable outcome by which they give it back. That no one has. Maybe you have a disagreement there, but I have not heard any actual plan or policy that would result in Russia returning that territory. There's no one has, even the most ardent pro-Ukrainian voice, I don't think, has a plan to win back the territory, either militarily or through negotiation. Is that not the case?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things there. Number one is that many people believe that Putin is in danger of losing this war. The Trump administration position is, and Putin's position is, that he's winning the war, that he just has to hold on. But there are signs of real strain in the Russian economy, in the Russia's ability to continue this war. And there are some who believe that should this war continue through the rest of this year, Putin's position would be greatly weakened, which is why he's making such a push to end the war right now. Now, could Ukraine roll back Russian troops with a surge of U.S. and European assistance? It's difficult to see that, but you could negotiate the terms of how much territory Russia would get. Remember, right now, Putin's position is that he deserves not just the territory that Russian troops now occupy, but all of the provinces he occupies. So give him parts of Donetsk and Luhansk provinces that he doesn't now control. He wants those as part of the terms. Here's the problem, though. Even if you make those territorial concessions, what you have is a very unstable situation where the war ends, Russia occupies 20% of Ukraine, and it has time to rebuild its forces to mount a new invasion a few years from now. That's what he did after the invasion of Crimea in 2014. Remember, we had a ceasefire. We held that ceasefire. It started in 2017 and it held for several years. But then in 5 years, he had rebuilt, he had rearmed, he reinvaded Ukraine. That's the scenario you're setting up. That's what worries Europe, which is why our European allies are so against the kind of terms that Putin is demanding and Trump is supporting.
Yes, I tend to agree with you, Joe. However, Trump won this election, and part of what he won on, one of his campaign promises, was he is ending this war. So it is within the purview of his role to determine that we are not allowing it to play out much longer. But you mentioned Europe. Europe obviously does not agree with Trump on this, and this is recalibrating our relationships with Europe. Europe is now seeing the United States as sort of going over to the other side, in with the bad guys, Russia and others. What do you foresee happening now? I know they're going to have, you were talking about the meeting in Saudi Arabia with Marco Rubio and Ukraine, but also the Europeans are meeting this week. I know Keir Starmer is running all of that. What do you foresee happening with European reaction here, and how will that make a difference?
Well, this is actually excellent point. This is actually the bigger story because Ukraine is sort of the current issue, but it's happening in this massive geopolitical earthquake that has happened in just the last couple of weeks, where it's become clear that President Trump is switching sides, that he's abandoning the Western alliance, American leadership of the West, in order to form an alliance with Putin. That's his goal. That's what he wants. In order to do that, he has to get rid of this irritant, which is Ukraine, which is why you see the president pressuring Ukraine to make these concessions. He wants to end the war and get on with his bigger alliance. But it's not just me that's saying this. This is the view of the U.S. national security community. I was just at a conference on foreign relations meeting last week, and it was nearly uniform that Trump is abandoning the Western alliance. We have not done anything like this in the 75 years that NATO has existed. And what does that mean? That means that European leaders are understanding that they can no longer depend on U.S. security guarantees. That greatly weakens NATO, the longest running and most successful national security alliance in history, and that they have to defend their own resources. For example, the man who will be Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, just said after he won the election 2 weeks ago that his number one priority was to strengthen Europe so that they could achieve true independence from the United States. A German chancellor has never made a statement like that, at least not since Hitler was defeated.
But
This is a
wouldn't
massive swing where people cannot feel they can no longer depend on US national security, so they have to build up their own resources, which is probably a good thing, but that might include nuclear weapons, with both Germany and Polish officials now talking about starting their own nuclear weapons programs. That's a recipe for nuclear proliferation and
well,
instability throughout the globe.
just real quickly, because then we'll have to run. But I mean, I'm glad you acknowledge that. I know many Americans probably would say it would be a good thing for Europe to pay a greater
Yes.
share of the defense for what's happening in their own backyard, especially as we have, pressing matters to look at in the other direction on the earth, with China becoming such a threat. Can we, can the U.S. afford to be taking care of Europe to this degree? I know Europe contributed, millions to the defense of Ukraine as well, but they're kind of, we're an equal partner in this sort of thing. Many Americans feel like they've been taken advantage of, and that Europe really should be. And then also Europe remains totally reliant on Russian energy exports. And if they were really serious about combating Russia, they'd do something about that, which is something Trump has warned about for years.
Yes, well, they are cutting their energy independence, so that's going to take some time. But yes, and they are increasing their defense spending, but that's going to take some time. Those are two positive things you want to see happen, but not at the expense of abandoning the Western alliance. Our greatest strength in the world is the worldwide alliance systems that we have, so we don't have to fight alone. So we're not waging these battles alone. Russia has nothing like this. China has nothing like this. And here you see Trump throwing it away, just as in the first 7 weeks, he's also disarmed the United States by abandoning our economic assistance programs, our foreign aid programs. Countries have problems. We give them money to solve those problems. They have good relations with us in order to preserve those income streams. These are two incredibly important tools of U.S. national security strength. Trump is abandoning them. Why? Because he wants to have an alliance with Vladimir Putin. There aren't many national security experts who would agree with that calculation.
Well, obviously, this is the end of the post-war era as we knew it. This is a geopolitical earthquake, and thank you so much, Joe, because you are an important voice guiding us through all this and explaining to us its larger meaning. So thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Next up, why mainstream media has no sense of humor. We'll discuss. Stay with us.